It was a cold December morning in the small town of Willow Creek. The mist clung to the trees like forgotten memories, and the sun struggled to break through the heavy clouds. The town square, usually bustling with cheerful faces and the scent of freshly baked bread, now stood silent. Christmas was only a week away, but joy seemed like a distant echo. At the edge of the town, nestled between a row of brick houses with chipped paint and leaning fences, stood a tiny, crumbling cottage. It belonged to Mrs. Clara Bennett, a woman in her late 60s with a silver bun always pinned neatly, a worn-out coat 3 winters old, and a heart much bigger than her home. Clara had once been a schoolteacher, loved by children and respected by parents. But time had not been kind. After her husband passed and her son moved abroad for work, she found herself alone. Her days were quiet, her nights quieter. She survived on a modest pension, carefully budgeting every coin, and often skipping meals so she could buy medicine for her arthritis. Each morning, Clara followed the same routine. She would light the old stove, wrap herself in layers, and take a slow walk to the corner bakery to buy a single loaf of bread. She rarely spoke, except to thank the baker's boy, Sam, who always offered her a smile with the bread. But that morning, something felt different. As she stepped outside, her foot caught on a loose stone, and she stumbled. A hand reached out just in time to steady her. Clara looked up into the eyes of a young man in a dark hoodie, his face half hidden by the scarf around his neck. "You all right, ma'am?" he asked gently. "Oh. Yes, thank you. I didn't see that stone," she replied, brushing herself off. The young man nodded and helped her upright. "I'm new here. Just passing through. My name's Ethan." "Clara," she said, her voice soft. "Well, welcome to Willow Creek, Ethan." They exchanged a few more words before Ethan walked off toward the park bench near the square, a large backpack slung over one shoulder. Clara noticed his shoes were wet, his jeans torn at the knee, and his eyes carried a tiredness beyond his years. Something tugged at Clara's heart. She stood there for a long moment before continuing her walk to the bakery. That evening, Clara lit the last of her candles. Her electricity had been cut off weeks ago, and she hadn't told anyone. She wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, spooned some broth from a half-empty pot, and stared at the flickering flame. Her thoughts returned to Ethan. A stranger with kind eyes. Outside, the wind howled. Clara walked to her window and peeked out. Across the street, under the shelter of the park gazebo, sat Ethan, curled up on the bench. She hesitated. Then, without another thought, she poured what was left of her broth into a thermos, grabbed a spare blanket, and stepped outside. "Ethan," she called softly. He stirred, blinking sleepily. "Mrs. Bennett? It's too cold to be out here. Come inside." "I insist." Ethan hesitated. "I don't want to trouble you." "You're not. Just for the night." Gratitude filled his eyes as he stood and followed her. Inside, Clara handed him the blanket and thermos. He accepted both with a quiet thank you. They sat in silence for a while, the candle casting soft shadows. "You don't have to tell me your story," Clara said gently, "but if you ever want to, I'm here." Ethan nodded. That night, kindness filled the tiny cottage like warmth. Over the next few days, Clara and Ethan shared quiet moments, tea in mismatched cups, stories from Clara's teaching days, Ethan fixing the creaky steps, and laughter that surprised them both. Bit by bit, Ethan opened up. He had lost his job months ago, then his apartment. His mother had passed, and he had no family left. He was searching for something, work, purpose, maybe even hope. Clara listened, not with pity, but with the patience of someone who knew pain and had learned to sit with it. One morning, as Clara stirred the last of the tea leaves, Ethan spoke. "You know, Mrs. Bennett, you didn't have to help me. Most people wouldn't." Clara smiled. Kindness doesn't always need a reason, dear. Sometimes, it just needs a heart. They both fell silent, the words settling in like the first snow on the windowsill. But not everyone in Willow Creek shared Clara's open heart. Whispers started in the town, about the strange young man staying in the old Bennett house. Mrs. Dalton, who ran the sewing shop, raised an eyebrow. Mr. Harris from the grocery murmured warnings to his customers. Even the baker, Sam, though fond of Clara, looked uneasy. One afternoon, as Clara walked into the store, she overheard them. "She's too old to know better. Could be dangerous, letting in someone like that." Clara stood still, her heart heavy. Later that evening, she told Ethan. He was quiet for a long moment. "Maybe I should go," he said. Clara shook her head. "No. Don't let fear decide your worth. Let your actions speak louder." Ethan looked at her, eyes moist. "I promise, I won't let you down." The next few weeks passed with unexpected light. Ethan found small jobs around town, chopping firewood, helping at the bakery, even fixing Mrs. Dalton's broken porch step. People began to see him differently. Slowly, suspicion gave way to acceptance. And in the warmth of Clara's tiny home, a bond grew that neither expected. A bond born from a small act of kindness that was about to change everything. The snow had finally stopped, leaving a white blanket over Willow Creek. Chimneys breathed warmth into the sky, and wreaths hung on doors like quiet wishes. Christmas Eve was approaching, and the town was waking up to celebration. But for Clara and Ethan, something deeper was stirring, a sense of renewal neither had expected. Ethan now had a place in Willow Creek. He had become more than the stranger who slept under the gazebo. People began to smile at him, greet him by name, even offer him warm meals. He shoveled driveways for free, helped carry groceries for the elderly, and volunteered to decorate the town square. It was Clara who had opened that first door, but Ethan had walked through the rest on his own. One morning, a knock came at Clara's door. It was Mr. Lawrence, a tall, kind-eyed man who owned the hardware store. "Good morning, Clara. Is Ethan home?" "Of course, come in, Mr. Lawrence. He's just fixing the cupboard hinges." Ethan emerged, wiping his hands on a rag. "Hello, sir. Ethan, I've got a proposition for you. One of my part-time boys left town suddenly. I could use some help in the shop, if you're interested. It's not glamorous, but it's steady, and it pays weekly." Ethan looked at Clara. Her eyes lit up with hope. "I'd be honored, sir. I won't let you down." And so, Ethan began working at Lawrence's hardware. He learned quickly, charmed the customers, and soon became indispensable. He spent his evenings helping Clara with chores and learning to cook from her old recipe books. One night, Clara found him seated at the kitchen table, reading a tattered novel by candlelight. "You enjoy reading?" she asked, surprised. "I used to love it," Ethan said. "Back before everything fell apart. You could take some night classes. The library offers them for adults." He looked thoughtful. "Do you think I could?" "Of course. You have more potential than you know." Those words planted something in Ethan's heart. A small seed. And it began to grow. The new year arrived with cheer. Clara and Ethan celebrated quietly, a warm stew, a lit candle, and laughter echoing in the small cottage. Outside, fireworks bloomed in the sky, but inside, something more lasting ignited. A few weeks later, while dusting the attic, Ethan discovered a box filled with Clara's old teaching supplies, books, posters, and handwritten lesson plans. "You were really passionate about this, weren't you?" Clara nodded, a far-off look in her eyes. "Teaching was my life. But after retirement, and everything else, I never thought I'd use them again." Ethan picked up a notebook. What if we found a way to? She raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? There are so many kids in this town who don't have after-school support. Maybe we could start a little learning circle. Here. Just once a week. We could call it Bennett's Corner. Clara laughed. That sounds terribly quaint. It sounds like hope. Flyers went up on community boards. Clara was unsure anyone would show up. But on the first Saturday, 5 children knocked on the door. They came with tattered notebooks and shy smiles. Clara greeted them like a grandmother greeting her grandchildren, and Ethan set up a makeshift whiteboard. Together, they taught math, spelling, stories, and more importantly, kindness. The number grew every week. By spring, Bennett's Corner had become a beloved gathering. Parents donated books, the bakery sent treats, and the town hall offered a larger room. Clara beamed with new energy, and Ethan found a calling he hadn't known he was seeking. Then came the opportunity that changed everything. One rainy Thursday, a woman named Olivia Monroe arrived in Willow Creek. She was a former resident, now an education program director with a major nonprofit in the city. Her car had broken down near the town, and she took shelter in the town hall, where she stumbled upon Bennett's Corner. She stayed to watch the session. Clara and Ethan didn't notice her at first. But Olivia observed the laughter, the learning, the compassion. It wasn't just tutoring, it was transformation. After the session, she introduced herself. I run a youth outreach program in the city. We train community educators, fund learning centers in rural areas, and help people build better futures. I think your model is something special. Clara looked stunned. Ethan blinked. We're just doing what we can. Exactly, Olivia smiled. That's why it works. Would you consider working with us? Maybe train others. Set up more Bennett's Corners in other towns. It felt surreal. Clara held Ethan's hand under the table. We'd need to think about it, Clara said. Of course. Here's my card. You have something powerful here. Think it over. That night, Clara and Ethan sat by the window, the card resting between them. What do you think? Clara asked. I think it could change lives. Like you changed mine. She squeezed his hand. Then let's say yes. Together. In the weeks that followed, Olivia returned, and plans were made. Clara and Ethan were offered training, travel stipends, and the resources to grow their little learning circle into a network. It wasn't easy. Clara worried she was too old. Ethan feared he wasn't smart enough. But each encouraged the other. They attended workshops, spoke at gatherings, and soon, their story became an inspiration. From a bench to a classroom, Olivia once said in a speech. This is what kindness can build. The cottage in Willow Creek remained their home, but it had grown into a place of purpose. Children still came, laughter still echoed, and kindness still lived in every corner. Ethan began writing again, his own stories, filled with hope. Clara started a small column in the town paper, sharing reflections and life lessons. They were no longer just surviving. They were living. And all because of a single, small act of kindness. By the time summer warmed the town of Willow Creek, the transformation was visible to all. Flowers bloomed in window boxes, laughter echoed from street corners, and the townsfolk wore smiles that came from something deeper than just good weather. There was a new spirit in the air, one that had grown from a single act of kindness, and now touched every life in its reach. Bennett's Corner, once a small idea born from 2 hearts healing together, had blossomed into a network of learning and compassion. What started with 5 children now involved over 100, across 5 nearby towns. Clara and Ethan traveled every weekend, visiting libraries, old schoolrooms, and even barns converted into learning spaces. Their mission was simple: no child should ever feel forgotten, and no life was ever too broken to rebuild. Back home in Willow Creek, the cottage had also changed. Donations had poured in, allowing them to restore the crumbling roof, install solar-powered lights, and turn the attic into a proper study room. The once cold and dim home now glowed warmly, always filled with the scent of baking bread, scribbling pencils, and quiet dreams taking shape. Ethan had started writing regularly, not just stories, but journals, reflections, and eventually, articles. One of them, titled The Bench That Became a Beginning, caught the attention of a national education magazine. Soon, he was invited to speak at youth conferences. Despite the recognition, he remained humble. Every time someone asked him what changed his life, he would reply, "A woman who made soup and offered me a blanket." Clara, on the other hand, found her second spring. Teaching again made her feel younger, needed, and most of all, alive. Her eyes sparkled whenever she stood before a group of children, chalk in hand. She became known as Miss Clara even to adults. But as with all stories of growth, challenges soon followed. One day, during a visit to a neighboring village, Ethan was approached by a stern-looking man in a gray suit. "Mr. Ethan James. My name is Harold Bryce. I'm from the Department of Education." Ethan tensed. "Yes. I've read about your program. Impressive. But, unconventional. You and Mrs. Bennett aren't certified to run formal education centers. There are laws about this." Ethan explained their work, how it was community-driven, volunteer-based, and never claimed to replace formal schooling. But Harold remained skeptical. You may mean well, but rules exist for a reason. I'll be conducting a review. If your operations don't comply, we'll have to shut them down. The words hit Ethan like cold water. For the first time in months, he felt that old fear creeping back. That night, he told Clara. She listened quietly. We knew the road wouldn't be easy, she said. But we didn't come this far to stop now. The community rallied. Parents wrote letters. Children drew pictures with messages like, please don't take our Miss Clara away, and Ethan makes learning fun. The local newspaper published an editorial titled Heart over bureaucracy. When Mr. Bryce returned for the review, he didn't expect to see over 200 people gathered outside the town hall, holding signs, singing songs, and offering testimonies. Inside, Clara and Ethan presented everything transparently: lesson plans, volunteer lists, safety protocols, and proof that every child involved was still enrolled in regular school. Mr. Bryce, a man known for strict policies, remained silent through most of it. But when a young girl named Lucy stood up, her pigtails bouncing, and said, before Miss Clara helped me, I didn't know I could be smart, something changed in his expression. He cleared his throat. I need to write a report. But let me say this, what you've built here is remarkable. Keep your doors open. Cheers erupted in the hall. Clara cried quietly. Ethan closed his eyes, grateful beyond words. Months passed, and Bennett's Corner continued to grow. But the most powerful transformations were personal. Sam, the baker's boy who used to hand Clara her bread, had struggled with confidence. Under Ethan's mentorship, he applied for a business grant and opened a side pastry venture, which quickly gained popularity. Mrs. Dalton, once skeptical of Ethan, became his fiercest advocate. She donated her old sewing machines, and together, they started a weekend skill-building workshop. Even Mr. Harris, the grumpy grocer, surprised everyone when he offered scholarships for children who wanted to pursue technical education. Kindness had become contagious. And then came the letter. It arrived in a plain white envelope, addressed to Ethan. He opened it at the kitchen table while Clara stirred tea. It's from a university, he whispered. She turned, curious. What does it say? He read aloud, Mr. Ethan James, based on your community work, publications, and life experience, we are pleased to offer you a full scholarship to pursue a degree in community education leadership. Clara dropped her spoon. Oh, Ethan. He laughed, almost in disbelief. They want me to study. Me. Because they see what I saw, Clara said. A light that just needed a little shelter to grow. The following autumn, Ethan packed his things for the city. It was bittersweet. He would be gone for a year, returning on weekends. Clara assured him she'd be fine, and the community vowed to keep Bennett's Corner thriving. On his last night before leaving, Ethan stood on the same bench where he had once sat, cold and lost. He whispered to the wind, thank you. Clara watched from the window, smiling. He turned to her. You saved me. No, dear, she replied. You saved yourself. I just opened the door. And with that, the ripple continued. The city skyline shimmered under the fading autumn sun as Ethan stepped onto campus. The university was bustling with life, students carrying heavy books, professors in hurried steps, laughter echoing from courtyards. For someone who had once sat on a park bench with torn jeans and no direction, it was overwhelming. Yet, somewhere inside him, he felt he belonged. His dorm room was modest. A single bed, a desk by the window, a bookshelf waiting to be filled.